let me just step back for a moment here. We also discussed the possibility of just having an agreement based on sex, for example, and what would be the parameters of that. This was already after I had seen the point of, and saying to Andrea, look, I'm most likely going to go in a year. And I said that to her. That's when we started discussing what to do now, because at that point we were still in the agreement. So I'd said, okay, I'm going to leave in a year. And from that point we were still looking at, can we continue the agreement, and looking at the consequences of if we continued for a year and then I left. And I found, in looking at different scenarios of how we could continue the agreement, as mentioned, continuing the agreement for sex, and how that would work, and where would I then stay. It was like there was all these variables still moving around, which is the point that I experienced within the agreement the whole time, was these variables moving around which were never placed specifically and stable. So I eventually I had a short discussion with Bernard, and actually I don't even remember what he said now, but I just remember looking at the point in terms of those variables, for example, never actually going away until a definitive decision is made. And so within that, I just looked at, okay, let's just end the agreement, because within ending the agreement, that was certain. That was definitive. There were no variables still floating around that needed to be adjusted. It was a clear decision, and that was, you could say, the only point of clarity that I could see within the whole situation was to just end the agreement, because that was a clear statement, you could say, a clear decision that didn't have any gray areas, where every other point that we were looking at had these gray areas. And I just, obviously, that was part of the problems, you could say, within the agreement, was these gray areas that sort of, within these gray areas there was always this tension there, not knowing. So from that perspective we decided to end the agreement. Okay, so after the agreement was over, we ended the agreement. My experience immediately after the agreement was, or rather after the agreement was over, was there's a level of silence, you could say. I'd made the decision to end the agreement because now I was going back to Canada. From this perspective, I then began to look at, what am I going to do with my life practically? Within this there was a certain degree of clarity and certainty, which was cool, which was part of the silence that I was experiencing. There was no more of these floating uncertainties. So that was cool to be able to see that, and to see that I could now start making some decisions, some definitive, absolute decisions, going in a particular direction. because within the agreement it was like I was kind of here, I was kind of there, and within that I couldn't really put my foot down and move forward. There was really nothing underneath me. It's like standing on air. There were points which was cool within the agreement, which was unfortunate to have to give up. But I mean, I'm not sure if unfortunate is the word to have to give up, but I mean, so when I ended the agreement, there was still, like, I was looking at those points, you know. Actually, those points that I was looking at in giving up were more as I was leading towards ending the agreement. It was like I was looking at what I would have to give up, what I enjoyed about the agreement, which I would no longer have. After the agreement was over, I mean, I'm pretty fine to have the agreement be over. In a way, I experienced, you know, anger towards myself, frustration towards myself. And I was fed up towards myself because I had waited, or I hadn't made a decision definitively on what I was going to do with my life. And I was kind of, once the agreement ended, what I saw as I was actually kind of waiting in the agreement. The agreement was there as a point of me waiting. After the agreement was over, I kind of began to see that point. That was related to not wanting to leave the farm. There's like a fear of leaving the farm, in a way. So you could say there's a point of sadness in the agreement being over, a sadness, a disappointment in myself, you could say. And even looking at now the point of why did the agreement happen, what was happening within the agreement in terms of me waiting and not actually making a decision. It's like I was disappointed in myself that I wasn't being directive, and I was waiting that whole time, and I was waiting for so long. And it's like I never went anywhere, you could say. I never moved or progressed. It was like I was in limbo. So within that there was a bit of disappointment. Relief as well. The agreement was cool in that it brought up lots of points, but within it there was also lots of tension within myself, within the agreement, which in a way after it's over you just kind of let go and release those points, and so it's a relief, you could say, also from that perspective. I would say that's my experience. Okay.